I was this close to booking a microblading appointment, but this one Instagram post changed everything. Hi, my name is Diana, and if you have ever considered a microblading, any sort of eyebrow procedure, you're gonna wanna hear this. And yes, I'm talking about hyperrealism, which is an alternative to the traditional microblading procedure that we all know, some love, some hate. Turns out this is a new technique that I think it's much better. So I'm going to talk about why, the pros and cons of each of them, and maybe this video will help you understand which of the two is the better option for your case in terms of budget, technique, duration, type of skin, all sorts of those things. I will also, of course, share my experience with hyperrealism and why I love it so much and why it has been one of the best decisions and investments of my life. It has been definitely an investment, that's for sure. It wasn't necessarily cheap, but I would do it again, which in fact I will have to eventually, but you know, we'll get to that. Let's go. So let's start from the beginning. Why did I end up looking into this? Long story short, I am Mrs. Sparse Eyebrows. Okay, I'm not hiding it. I came to terms with it. Since I was a teenager and I started investigating the world of, you know, makeup and all those things, I found out that there was a way to actually make my eyebrows fuller. And I started using all sorts of eyeshadows, found out the world of actual eyebrow products, which vary from creamy, powder, deep brows, all sorts of things. And I will not so proudly admit that I've been through some phases.
Because nobody admits anything they've done!
Yeah. Not my proudest moments. It took me years. It took me years to perfect as much as I could my technique and to learn how to not look like a clown with eyebrow blindness. Yeah. Eyebrow blindness is a thing. I assure you of that. As one does, hopefully, you learn. I actually tried so many other things as well, not only makeup, a bit more semi-permanent techniques or aesthetic procedures out there. Eyebrow tints, proper shaping, for me has always been a problem with the shaping as well, to get them professionally shaped, or even myself, I have plucked them not very much because I felt like, because I had so many bold spots, if I overly plucked my eyebrows, I had the feeling that I would be left with basically no eyebrows. And that was a fear of mine. So I think I did get them plucked professionally like twice. And sure enough, it looked fine. They tinted them as well. It was all good and dandy, but that lasts about 3 weeks and you have to repeat it every single time. And in order to get rid of the bold spots and get like a proper eyebrow shape, they would make them thinner than I like. And I was afraid of, you know, this 2000s lines for eyebrows that people used to have. Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back. But I've never been that type of girl. So I did not consider that as a good long-term option. Something else that I tried as well was laminating my eyebrows professionally. Also not a great option. Basically, you couldn't see anything because my eyebrows are exactly too blonde for it. It was basically like they didn't do anything, and I remember I spent 100 euros for that and I was so mad. I was so mad. You could see no difference. It took them like 2-3 hours or a long time, I don't know, that I felt wasted, and 100 euros out the window for no reason whatsoever. So I thought, look, maybe microblading is for me. I felt like that was, however, too permanent for my liking, and I was a bit afraid because of how special my eyebrows are and how difficult they were to properly fill in. I was just being skeptical and afraid. Kind of like no commitment. I tried to look into it just to see. I stumbled upon what was to be my permanent makeup artist Instagram. I was kind of like, you know, scrolling through their results, seeing what they were talking about. They are teachers. They seem very professional. It caught my eye that they were also advertising their results for hyperrealism, and I had never heard about it before. I read about it on their profile, which they were explaining, you know, what it is, what's the difference, which we'll get to in a minute. And I started doing this whole bunch of research online, and I figured out there was not as much information about hyperrealism as I would have liked to see and to find. It is a fairly new technique, so not a lot or not every single makeup artist, permanent makeup artist, offers this technique. Everybody does microblading, but not everybody does hyperrealism. Now, this eyebrow history of mine, plus I do like to do my makeup, it does take time. It does take time to carve yourself a pair of proper eyebrows. It takes time, you know? It doesn't really matter how experienced you are with it. It's always going to take time out of your routine in your day. This whole bunch of factors were the reason why I ended up taking this decision. Microblading, like I said, was the obvious choice, but upon the little research I could do, I opted for the latter. Now, microblading is this technique that is done with a blade. They cut the little hairs into your skin, essentially. Because it is done with a blade, it's a pretty neat result, which is amazing. It looks amazing. It looks like you just, put gel in your eyebrows constantly and they look on flick. I wanted something more natural looking as well. I wanted to have the option of doing my makeup and looking fully glam, or like right now, I'm not fully glammed up, you know what I mean, but I have my brows on right now and sure, they look very full, reddish. When I do my makeup, I always do my eyebrows as well because I want them to match my hair, not my natural hair, which is a color that they mostly always going to choose when they are, getting your eyebrows on your face. That sentence did not make sense. Hyperrealism, because it is done with a machine, just like when they do a tattoo, for instance, it's more easy to manually curve the hairs. That allows for a more flowy, natural result. Some people go really crazy with it. I will try to insert some pictures. I want them to look super wild and super natural. I wanted a result that is somewhere in between what microblading offers and what hyperrealism offers in terms of this flowy, natural look. But I also wanted a bit of like a neat side of it, somewhere in between, especially here on this inner side of the eyebrows. I always like it to be a little bit more, natural looking. I want the hairs to spike up in all directions sometimes. So you can see it's actual hairs. The problem that I had when I was doing my makeup is because I didn't have any hairs there, barely any hairs there. I never had this kind of fluffy look. You know what I mean? I also wanted something that would give me a long-lasting solution. And microblading per se is already a pretty long-lasting procedure, but... Ay, señora. Hyperrealism, turns out, lasts even longer. I think microblading on average lasts about a year, maybe a bit over a year, whilst hyperrealism will give most people a better looking result even at 18-24 months. Another factor that made me go for hyperrealism is most definitely the kind of skin types that it is aimed for, which is basically all of them. While microblading tends to look better in skins that are dry to normal, for skins that tend to be a bit more oily, even if it's just on a certain area, I was afraid that it will look blurry because that's what happens in most of those cases with microblading. While because of the little ultra fine needle they use on this digital machine for hyperrealism, it allows for, I think, more precise positioning of the tint dye. I'm not sure what you call this, I guess a tint. So it tends to heal more like it should. Speaking of healing, microblading also tends to scab more in the healing process. Because it is done with this blade, usually ends up causing more trauma to the skin, whilst hyperrealism will very often scab less, and the healing time is often shorter as well. I did not know exactly what to expect because there was a lot of microblading healing processes out there, but not so much for hyperrealism, so I was a bit unsure of what to expect. I did end up finding this one picture that follows through the different days and weeks of the healing process for hyperrealism that I compared to my own healing process, and it was pretty accurate. Mind you, everybody's different. Everybody's body is different. But in this case, it was quite accurate for me, at least. For you, it might vary maybe 1 or 2 days, more or less for each stage in the healing, but for the most part, it is kind of what you can expect. I will also try to insert some of the pictures of my own healing process. I didn't take as many. It is also quite easy. The only most difficult part of it is the urge to scratch yourself and also not being able to wash your face for 10 days straight. That's not fun. Not fun. You can try, and that's what I did. You can try to wash your face, with micellar water here and there, like controlling where you clean with a pad or something like that. But you cannot wash or wet your eyebrows. You cannot sweat. You cannot go to a sauna and, no spa days for a while for you after your procedure. All those things you have to be pretty mindful of. There's a very funny story. After my last hyperrealism appointment, I went to a house party in the middle of the summer and it was so hot so hot. I had a Spanish fan with me, and I remember everybody was asking me, why are you so careful with not sweating? And I had to tell them, so everybody kept on fanning me as well, like making sure my eyebrows stay safe. Very much appreciate it. And also, honestly, get yourself some friends like that. Friends that protect your eyebrows. That's what you need in your life. Other than that, it was pretty much okay. The little scabs I did get kind of started cleaning off at around day 12 to 14th, I think. Another thing I was wondering about, because nobody was ever saying anything on the internet, or I didn't find anything about it at least, was, can I put makeup on them? And if so, when can I start doing it? In my experience, the answer is as soon as all the scabs fall off, which is about day 12 to 14th, depending on the person. Nothing happened. The dye/tint never fell off or anything just because I put makeup on top of it. There's very different layers of skin where each thing is laying. They should not interfere with one another as long as the scabbing already happened and it's mostly healed. The full healing won't happen until, I think, month 4 to 6, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure. I'll correct myself if I need to. Now, the procedure per se, which can be 2 to 3 appointments for the first time you do it, is, I would say, rather easy. It also depends on the artist that is doing it for you. It was, I wouldn't say painless. It was uncomfortable. They do numb the eyebrow areas. You shouldn't really feel much towards the end, since it is quite a bit of a long procedure. Mine took 2 to 3 hours, the first one. Second one, probably something similar. And the last one, a bit less. I'm not sure exactly how much. I can't remember exactly how much, but less than that. By the way, not everybody needs 3 appointments like I did, just because of the way my skin heals and of the shade that we had to choose for my own hair, which is kind of on the lighter side. It tended to heal. It tended to heal way later than I wanted it. Since you cannot, and the artist also cannot guess how your body is going to heal, they try to make it a bit lighter at first, and then the second and third appointment, once you already have a feeling of what to expect after some of the initial healing, then it's easier for them to adjust that accordingly. Also, communication-wise, of course, you can and you should be able to check in throughout the process. They will sketch your face first to see an initial rough sketch of what it will look like. That's not what the end result is going to look like, but it allows you both, artist and client, to have a bit of communication of what you're expecting, maybe what your expectations are, what you would like more of or less of here and there, like that. There's an initial proper idea for the artist of what you want. And then over the process, he kept asking me, what you think of this? Would you like this longer? One more hair here? Would you like this or that? He tried to ensure that I was the happiest I could be with the end result. Because in the end, sure, it's not permanent. Hyperrealism in this case lasts 18 to 24 months. It also depends on your skin. It also depends on how you take care of it, but it does last about 2 years. So although it's not permanent, you want to be happy with it, right? And it's also not cheap, so might as well be happy with it. Seeing them for the first time, though, was definitely an experience. I almost cried. I was so happy. I remember telling him, wow, I have eyebrows. What a statement. I know. I was literally so happy to see myself like that, see it looking so natural. That moment, having taken the decision of doing hyperrealism instead of microblading, I realized was the right one all along, because it gave me the option to see myself with natural eyebrows, flowy eyebrows that looked full, that looked like real fine hairs, that follow a natural movement, that were not necessarily perfect in that way, but they are not so on purpose, if you get my meaning. Microblading, however, gives you or can give you this bolder look, and this was a personal preference all along. Mind you, I love the bold look on eyebrows. Like, if I do my eyebrows, when I do my makeup, this is what they look like. They don't look natural at all, I know. But you can still see, maybe on the camera it doesn't pick it up, but you can still see the hairs even through the makeup, the hairs that are not mine. But it allows me to have this versatility to switch between a more natural face and to be made up if I want to. I also spoke with my PM artist about a concern I had regarding this kind of procedure, whether it is microblading or hyperrealism. On the fade out phase, no matter what shade you used initially, microblading tends to fade into grayish, bluish tone after a while. I was really concerned about that because I really didn't want that. My PM artist explained to me that that only happens when, first of all, there's an incorrect mixture of shades, as I understood, and also because it is being applied into the wrong layer of skin. Cuts too deep or not too deep. I'm not sure exactly which one it was, whether too shallow or too deep. The thing is, it's not in the correct layer of skin. And that's why that happens, right? It can also happen with hyperrealism in theory, but it's much less likely for that to happen. And I didn't want to risk that happening. And so far, I have to say, I am over the year mark. I don't see any difference almost from what it was like after it properly healed, that is. You cannot expect to have what you have the first few weeks when it's still fresh. But the difference is so minimal, I cannot even tell, even if I wanted to. From my perspective, there's essentially no change, which is obviously good. Now we can talk prices.
Lord have mercy.
Of course, this will differ from cities, countries, and PM artists. Nobody charges the same, I think. It's true, microblading tends to be on the cheaper side compared to hyperrealism. However, I feel like the technique is worth the extra price. The longevity is worth the extra price. There's just so many pros to it. But of course, everybody's skin is different. As I mentioned earlier, my skin tends to be a bit of like not oily, I wouldn't say, but it's not perfectly normal either. I didn't want to risk it looking blurry or any of the things that we mentioned. And the proper natural look of it was my selling point. Now, not everybody needs that. And I am totally aware of that. Not everybody has the same need. Some people want it to look neat all the time, and that's perfectly fine. I would have also been happy to have that, but having the possibility to get this extra step for it to look even more real, that's why the hyperrealism name, then I wanted to take it, even if it meant a bit of an extra cost. What did I pay? I paid total, the 3 sessions I took. Not everybody needs 3 sessions. Most people need 2 actually, but I needed 3 because of, again, how my skin was healing, etc., etc. That meant that I paid a bit more. I will leave the prices of each appointment that I did here, just so you get a general idea of what it can cost you. You have to keep in mind that in 2 years' time, you will have to do it again, but the follow-up appointments will be much cheaper. It's not the same price that you paid the first time. So now, this varies a lot as well from PM artist to PM artist, like I mentioned. I would make sure, however, to not cheap out on this. You want to make sure that you're going to be happy with it. You're going to be stuck with it for a little while. You want to pay a decent price for a decent result. It's one of those things where you cannot be a cheapskate with. I'm sorry. Would I recommend skipping microblading for hyperrealism? The answer to that is it depends. It depends on your budget, on your skin type, the end result you're looking for. It depends on all the things that we've talked about. So you have to be the judge and decide what's best for you after knowing all this information. I hope it helped you somehow compare the two a little bit. I think a lot of people would benefit a lot more from hyperrealism, but of course, everybody's different. I hope this was informative enough for you to be able to make a decision if you were looking into this 2 procedures, or if you were interested, doing something to your eyebrows a bit more permanent. If you have any questions, of course, let me know in the comments, any worries, any concerns, any questions in general that you would have about this topic. Maybe there is something that I missed that I didn't touch upon. It's possible. I will be answering everything there. So if you found this helpful, then click the like button and subscribe. ASMR. Okay, this is awkward.